Okay, so Professor Sugden, we are here in Polo Lionello Bonfanti on a day of workshop in memory of Pier Luigi Porta, and we have a couple of questions for you about civil economy. Mm-hmm. And I would like to start with a less theoretical and more anecdotal question. When do you first met civil economy, or through which people? And
Well, I was a supervisor to Luigino Bruni when he was a PhD student, and we were I'm trying to think what we were working on actually, but I think we were certainly working on Smith, yeah. and we worked together, and then through Luigino, I got him after he'd graduated. We got on. He ran these heirs conferences, so, yes. And got to go into them, and it was. I sort of gradually realised that Luigino was part of one of the leading figures in a group. Mm-hmm. And the other people I knew in it was particularly Benedetto Gui. Yes. Oh, well, actually, it's because there were various conferences that they ran, so I was always invited to these conferences.
Great.
And so I kind of gradually got this feel that there was this group. You know?
Yeah, that's great. And after this meeting with Bruni, Professor Gui, and others, you start also publishing some papers, we can say, on related to civil economy. I mean, thinking about fraternity, reclaiming virtue ethics for economics. So you also became one of at least a reference person for a kind of Italian civil economy tradition. So the question that I guess now I would like to ask, also taking something that you said today in your talk, what are some key characteristics, if you have to describe what the civil economy approach or vision is, that you will?
Well, I have to say, actually, I think it's very difficult, because when we had the conference in Rome, which was, I think, last year, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And it was clear that everyone who was was speaking about what they thought civil economy was, and it's clear that there were lots of different pictures of what it was. All I can say is the kind of branch that I feel associated with is this picture, the picture of society. Well, one thing, the picture of civil society as a cooperative venture made up of a lot of small cooperative ventures, and the idea that the market is one of those, or part of that. And it's I suppose it's come from wanting to there's been this literature on the moral limits of the market as a kind of the idea that in some sense the market is necessary and useful to create wealth, but it's sort of morally corrupting, or morally needs to be kept in its place, and wanting to not to oppose that view, and the idea that you can engage in mutually beneficial trade with people, and also it's partly that, and it's partly also the other. Well, there's that kind of moral limits of markets tradition, and there's also this line in behavioural economics of wanting to explain non-selfish behaviour, but constantly using altruism, generosity, and the concept of reciprocity as being kind to the kind, being unkind to the unkind, and seeming to have missing out this concept of intending mutual benefit.
Yes.
And so my interest with Genovese, my interest with Smith, is trying to tease out these kind of elements of an Enlightenment view of the market and civil society that don't see the pursuit of mutual interest in some way corrupting.
This is interesting because indeed there are many voices in the civil economy. Some voices usually tend to put Genovese Smith, civil economy, and classical political economy in kind of contrast with each other. Whereas it seems to me that through this intended mutual benefit, also reciprocal or mutual assistance, you see a kind of more similarity and continuity between, not identity, but there is this a common theme, this view on the market?
I think so, yes. I mean, the when Luigino and I wrote about the possible contrast between Genovese and Smith,
Yes.
it was Smith had more of a. So Smith was, I think, his view of the market itself was predominantly worked by individuals pursuing their own interests, subject to the rules of justice. And he had the contrast between a kind of the world of justice and the world of sociality.
Yes.
So his theory of moral sentiments is kind of intended as the world of sociality. So I think that in that sense there is a slight difference in the way they think of the market. On the other hand, the thing which I found really interesting in Smith, and really really contrary to this approach of thinking, the way that behavioural economists were thinking of non-self-interest, is this idea of the correspondence of sentiment. So Smith's thought is that there's a fundamental sort of psychological tendency to take on, well, it's a fundamental tendency to take on the sentiments of others, but the ability to do it is psychologically somewhat constrained, so there are kind of degrees to which you can take it on. But this crucial thought that actually any correspondence of sentiments, negative or positive, was itself a source of pleasure. So people actually found pleasure in having similar sentiments.
Yeah.
And so I thought of this as being a possible, since I was interested in this idea of mutual benefit as being a fundamental principle of civil society, then you want to say, well, why would people act on this? What's the underlying motivation?
Yeah.
And to some extent, the underlying motivation can come from this Smithian sentiment.
Yes, that's great. Now, a kind of slight detour, right? Because I think it was 2008 or 2009, Bruni and you published this paper, Fraternity, why the market not need to be a morally free zone,
Yes.
right? And then I remember maybe the year after, 2009, a feminist economist, Julie Nelson, published a kind of a response to your
That's right,
paper. She raised some issues, but I remember the last issue that she raised was a kind of critique to you and Bruni for having chosen the word fraternity,
that's right.
Because of a kind of gender dimension. So she mentioned, I think she titled her paper sorority, right?
Exactly.
To say. So, but as in economy of Francesco in civil economy, we work a bit around this concept of fraternity. I mean, how do you see it? Do you see it like a real issue, this kind of argument that if you choose fraternity, you already have a kind of this masculine bias
Well, I would say definitely not, in the sense that fraternity is metaphorical. On the other hand, if you sort of think, well, I mean, the reason why I like the word fraternity is that this was actually partly because another sort of project I was working was with Benedetto Gui.
Yes.
We had this. He was obviously very keen on interpersonal relations, and we had a conference on interpersonal relations, and he asked me to be the co-editor of the book, that edited the paper. So we worked together quite a bit on trying to sort of agree our views about interpersonal relations. And his thought, which I took up and thought was right, was the idea that that in relatively inconsequential interactions, like the interaction between, well, he has the hairdresser, the interaction between the customer and the hairdresser, you're in personal contact, physical personal contact for a long time. You're having conversations and so on. And the idea that there was some value in this, and then the idea there's value in the, which I think is right actually, that there's being lost the value between being able to talk to the shopkeeper or the checkout assistant. But trying to think of what this was, and I thought that in a way the metaphor, to me, the metaphor of fraternity, because of the traditional use of that. Well, to me, I mean, there's a traditional religious use, but the use of the tradition, to me, the traditional use of it is the trade union, the craft thing. We're or the Friendly Society,
Yes.
they always call themselves brothers.
Yes, true.
And
Brotherhood.
brotherhood, and also, and to me, the thought of, if you sort of think of a stereotypical thing, what's the relationship between brothers?
Yes.
And it is to do with them being male in a way, because when people, if you sort of say, what would a stereotypical picture of sisters be? You think of, say, like, you know, in Pride and Prejudice, the Elizabeth Bennet and elder Jane, the elder sister, and their relationship is pictured as sort of sisterly love. It's kind of very effective.
Yes, yes.
Whereas the concept of the brothers, you sort of think of them as, well, we're on the same side, and we support one another, and we perhaps support the same. We go to the same football club. We chat about the same things, but it's much less effective.
Okay.
And so I felt that fraternity, I mean, if you sort of think of it as being the kind of a term has grown up around a metaphor of the real relationship between brothers, then it fits this picture better than sisterhood. And people think of sisterhood metaphorically. They think of mutual love.
Yes.
Fraternity is more like the attitude you have to your hairdresser.
Yeah.
You kind of we're pals.
Yeah.
We can talk together.
Yeah.
We can share. We recognise our mutual interests, but it's less effective. You know. So I think it was actually, I still like the word, but the bottom line is it's not. It's just a word.
It's a word, right?
And a word has. It isn't a gendered word. I don't think really. I think it's just.
Yeah, I mean, because we created with the Economy of Francesco, we are piloting this World Fraternity report, in which we try to measure, or we are attempting to try to measure fraternity in global societies, let's say. And one of the first critique that people made, even before reading the words, fraternity coming from a kind of Christian movement. Are you talking about brotherhood?
Which I must admit, I say, I think you're probably right, particularly, of course, in a Catholic tradition, whereas I was from a non-conformist tradition, so we didn't have fraternities. And of course, the Americans would think of universities, whereas to me, my sort of connotations of fraternity would be the Labour Party sort of thing, you know. Sort of, you'd say brothers, you know, or the trade union, we're brothers. Or indeed, that's what I read into the French Revolution, because I thought the idea of the French Revolution
in the fraternity.
The fraternity there was meaning non-hierarchical, where we've traditionally had a hierarchical relationship. We address one another as sir, this monsieur, so there's a sort of hierarchy, and they're trying to find a form of like citizen. So so it's a form horizontal term, and for brotherhood is the right kind of thing. It's a horizontal relationship that's not too unrealistically effective. This is so. In other words, when I think the French words, when I'm dealing with anybody a fellow citizen of France, how should I treat them? I should treat them as brothers treat brothers. So I think even if you're a French woman, I think you could say, well, a French woman dealing with a French woman as a fellow citizen, you could say, well, how am I supposed to deal with her? I should deal with her as brothers deal with brothers. Not as sisters deal with sisters.
And I remember, I think part of this was also in your, because then you and Bruni replied to Julie Nelson. You write a response. Great. I think it's enough for this. Thank you very much for your time, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.